I'm so grateful to Peter McCoppin for coming here today. Peter McCoppin is a man of immense charm and ability and leadership qualities. He's a great friend, and he has given of his time to come to the university when he is incredibly busy on his own. You may know that he was the music director of the Charlotte and the Victoria Symphonies. He has conducted orchestras all over the world. And I want to say that little did I ever imagine when I was sitting on the lawns of the legislature listening to the sounds of the of the 1812 overture and the crashing of the guns and the fireworks, that one day I, who was only one of 20,000 sitting listening to him, to the orchestra being conducted by my friend Peter McCoppin, would one day have the honor of introducing him here today. So without further ado, I give you Peter McCoppin. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all for the privilege and the pleasure of your company. And to those who are here gathered intimately and those who are viewing from afar, it is my honor and privilege to have this brief time with you today. The face of leadership is changing all over North America and indeed around the world. The power dynamics between men and women are shifting in ways that we have never seen before in history, as women continually rise more and more to positions of influence, authority, and leadership around the globe. The age-old cycle of male domination in patriarchal societies is slowly but surely diminishing, paving the way for a whole new paradigm, an exciting paradigm, in which at long last, I believe, we will see a balance of feminine and masculine energy, men and women collaborating in a neat, wonderful, and elegant forum to take our planet to places we have never seen before. It's exciting. It's wonderful. But that's not the end of the story. The age of the predatory top-down boss is dead, or at least is dying. Thank goodness for that. The leader of today has far different demands than any leader in past decades or centuries. Today, we expect our leaders to be immediate, accessible, available, intimate, spiritually intimate to us. Because it's in that close connection that we build bridges of trust, engagement, honor, respect. Today, leaders are much more connectors than directors of human behavior and talent, as organizations become more and more flattened. To which extent, then, the requirements for leadership, if a leader is truly to lead by example in all ways, are so much different than they were in times past. Now we expect leaders not only to be practiced in their skills, but masters of their character. So we hold them to high regard and high expectation that they would investigate themselves through self-reflection, self-examination, self-governance, and self-direction. Those softer skills become as important as, so to say, hard skills of times past. I think you agree. In the brief time that we have here today, I'd like to look at 4 different areas. First of all, a historic perspective of women in history and the rise of women to positions of influence through the 20th century. The second thing would be the paradox. Why is it, with women rising more and more to positions of authority, more and more to places of leadership, why are so few at the top of their organizations? It's a paradox. The third would be the new models of leadership, in which we see a subtle and lovely combination of traditional masculine and feminine attributes in a holistic offering. And finally, what we can do individually and collectively, really to nurture within us what I would choose to call the divine feminine. We're not speaking of gender there, we're speaking of an energetic presence. And how critical I believe that is as we would move forward in the future together. So, as we look back, for decades, for centuries, for millennia, men have led communities forward on this planet. Yes, there have been queens, but far more kings than queens, literally and metaphorically. Great achievements have been wrought by male leadership. Discovery, innovation, creativity, engineering, adventure. But we've also missed some golden opportunities in our humanness. And what are they? Borders and barriers have been held fast. Division underscored. Separation the norm. And all too often, I believe, conflict has been resolved with aggression, determination, determinism, and violence. What have we lacked? Community, inclusivity, connection, communication. All those subtle aspects that make for our human experience to be rich and full. So, within that same time, now decades, centuries, and millennia, women in so many societies traditionally and generally have been suppressed, in some cases subordinated, in too many cases subjugated. And it's interesting to see the evidence of that in practice, in language, and in tradition. Now let's just look at that a little more carefully. For example, in the German language, does anyone here speak German by chance? No. In the German language, the word for Lord is Herr, Lord or Herr. I am Herr McCoppin. Here is Herr Tweedy. Lord. The word for lady is Dame or Dame. It's a cognate. Now, if I want to say in the German language, or if anyone wants to say something is splendid, you say it's herrlich. It's lordly. If you want to say something is insipid, silly, maybe vacuous, you'd say it's dämlich or womanly. Isn't that startling? Even in the language. Now let's take it further. In French, the metaphor for a woman with child, carrying a child, la femme est enceinte. The woman is, actually translate, the woman is in a corset. She's carrying a child. Just a second here. She's in the fulfillment of her womanhood. And she's having to constrict and make inconspicuous that fact. So she has to appear svelte, perhaps just to satisfy her male counterpart. How does that sound to you? Let's take it further. What about the binding of feet, women's feet in Asia? Now, any stable structure requires a firm foundation. If we compromise the foundation, we diminish the strength of the structure. If we bind someone's feet, we make them weak. So here's a tradition, it's a practice. But what does it say? And we can take this even further, too. What about the burning of witches? And the most horrific of all, what about female castration, which is still practiced in some of the African countries? These are horrific statements. Now, I think, without being judgmental, I think that some of these have just been carried on because it was a practice. It was a tradition. It was the way things were done. Perhaps not sufficiently mindfully. Now, here in North America, when did it change? When did that dynamic change? It was about a century ago. Emily Pankhurst led the suffragette movement almost a century ago. Is everyone familiar with that? But even think of the word suffragette. Suffragette movement. And it was through her vision, her kinetic enthusiasm, her passion, her intensity, her absolutely unshakable belief that she would generate a movement that would change the course of history. And it was by that that women got to vote. Now, we have a voice, at least a voice. I grew up in the baby boomer generation, and in my neighborhood when I was about 5 years old, all the moms, including my own, were stay-at-home moms. We called them housewives. That was even considered to be a profession if you were filling out your tax form. What do you do? I'm a housewife. Okay. By the time I graduated high school, many of those same mothers were entering the workforce. And I believe they were doing so not just to augment the income of their families, but rather to assert their own independence, their own individuality, to participate. And it was amazing. When I graduated high school, perhaps my situation was atypical. Everyone in that class, men and women alike, women and men alike, went into university with the intention of entering the professions. By 1980 in Canada, the division between men and women in Canadian universities, 50-50. Now, where is it today? In the faculties of law, medicine, and engineering today in Canadian universities, women outnumber, and in some cases far outnumber men. It's astounding. What a change, and just in short time in history. Now, we're not looking to a situation where we're going to diminish men. No, not at all. We're looking for equality at long last. And it seems to me that in any stable condition, a fundamental of any stable condition in nature is balance. That's all we're asking for, just balance. Wonderful. So let's look at this some more. Now, we talked about that inertia which was broken a century ago with Emily Pankhurst and the suffragette movement, and then the women who followed after that. In some cases, yes, indeed. Perhaps they were a bit impassioned and one might even say a bit militant. Gloria Steinem, the movement, the feminist movement, women's liberation, and so forth, they had to be. They were carving new paths. They were creating a new paradigm. And we think about the great women leaders, political leaders of the 20th century. Margaret Thatcher, who invented Iron Lady? I wonder. Or Golda Meir, wasn't she amazing? Golda Meir, who was called by her male counterpart, the President of the United States at that same time, as the only man in her cabinet. Says a lot about him, doesn't it, in a way? Nevertheless, these women had to be, in so many ways, behaving like men because they had to move into a new direction. Just makes me think. When we have these conversations, things just come into my mind, and I hadn't planned to say this, but it occurs to me. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. That's a great book. And there's a character in that book named Chablis. And he said, if you want to play the game, you've got to play by the rules. And it just occurs to me now, where are the rules? And how often we conform, abandoning our own authenticity, our own purpose, our own intention, just to fit in. Interesting. So let's look at more evidence of the rise of women through this 20th century into our current times. So exciting. Now, the last economy was based on manufacturing. The current economy, as we all know, is based on communication, innovation, creativity. How many people here have read Sheryl Sandberg's book, The Lean In? It's a wonderful book. She's the COO of Facebook, and a forward-thinking, wonderful leader. I won't say a woman, leader. And what does she say in that book? The reason why women are doing so well in these current times is because they have 4 salient attributes that they individually and collectively share. 1, the ability to focus, to exclude any kind of distraction. 2, the ability to listen, and not only to listen to the words, but to listen below the words, to capture the feeling, to listen intuitively, empathetically, instinctively, really to build those bridges of trust. The Japanese have an expression, words nothing, meaning everything. What is the meaning? How are we connecting? truly, what is truly being offered, what is truly being connected, what is being essentially communicated. The third attribute would be the ability to communicate openly. No hidden agenda. Inclusive, engaging, wonderful. And the last, a woman's innate ability to be able to work within a fluid working environment. Really building on a woman's innate skills to multitask. How important all of those are. But you know, there's more evidence that's so striking. And it has to do with the fact that women, and I say this with complete admiration, you see, I think you see that I'm impassioned to this subject. Quite. And that is that women are so adaptable, far more than men, in these changing times. In 2008, we had this economic collapse. It affected the whole world. And according to statistics and investigation, many men said, well, I would like to have my same job back again. Women said, oh no, here's a golden opportunity to learn something new. Let's move in a whole new direction. How fabulous that would be. And so let's look at that, for example, in a number of cases around the world. Let's take Rwanda, for example. Rwanda, after the genocide, 73% of the adults remaining were women. Their partners, their breadwinners were gone. So what did they do? They rolled up their sleeves. They started new businesses. They hired other women. They educated and fed their families, and they stimulated the economy. The same thing happened in Bosnia. The exact same situation. In areas which had been war-torn just a few years earlier, there were women starting up small businesses, stimulating the economy, fully participatory in their communities. Absolutely fabulous. Fabulous. Let's take it further. In Indonesia and South Korea, today, there are 500,000 small businesses started by entrepreneurial women in the past decade. In China, 20% of all small businesses are owned and operated by women. In the United States, it's estimated between now and 2018, 5 million new jobs will be started and generated by the efforts of entrepreneurial women. Isn't it amazing? It's fabulous when we think about it. But there's a paradox here. The paradox is, why do we see so few women at the top? And Sheryl Sandberg has done some very deep investigation in this direction. And this is what she would tell us. Of all the parliamentary seats held worldwide, 18% are held by women. Of all the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies in North America today, only 21 are women. Of all the board seats in Canada, there are 4,400 board seats in Canada, only 12% approximately held by women. Unfortunate. What a missed opportunity. What a missed opportunity. Did you read in the Globe and Mail only yesterday? We're talking about people who sit on boards for such a long time, and after a while they have so little to contribute. They become professional board people. Is that B-O-R-E? I'm not too sure. Nevertheless, and if we want to generate innovation, we want to generate creativity, how do we want to do that? Through conflict, in merging of differences. That's where the juice will be flying. That's fantastic. Think about William Blake. Without contraries, no progressive. Fabulous. Dr. David Bohm, the founder of the implicate theory of quantum physics. Without contraries, no progressive. It's in our differenceness, in a creative conflict, in a debate, that we generate the greatest opportunities. Amazing. I was coming across a book and I wanted to share it with you. Very interesting. It's called The Female Brain by Luan Brizendine, MD. Wonderful book. I read it quite recently. And what she would actually say is that women, biologically, biochemically, are distinctly different from men. Doesn't mean superior or less or more, just different. What an interesting thing. And what she would say, and that's the reason why, for example, that women are more connected to their emotional intelligence, their sensibility, than men. And it doesn't mean that men cannot access that also. We can do so mindfully and intentionally, but we don't come to it as easily. Science would tell us today that 90% of the information we gather, 90%, is coming through the neural pathways. The neural pathways, not developed through acumen. Interesting. We want to discover something, we want to think differently, feel differently, experience differently, see, feel, know differently. Isn't it interesting, in the Chinese language, I believe the most ancient Chinese character for mind and heart the same. Is that true? It is true, thank you. Exactly, no division. It's within our Western thinking that we've made a division between acumen and sensibility, between intellect and intuition, between head and heart. But the heart informs. Think about Joseph Campbell. Follow your bliss and don't be afraid. Follow your bliss. My goodness. Fabulous. Where does that emerge? So what we want to do is to come into a spirited dialogue, a communion, really, a union of many, a communion, where we play off and together with our innate capabilities in a fullness of human experience. And how fabulous that would be. Something else I wanted to share with you too. A survey was taken in the United States, it's about 10 years ago, and it was with couples having their firstborn child. And I don't know who initiated this, but I thought it was rather interesting. And the question was, for your firstborn, would you like to have a girl or a boy? Think about it. 75% said a girl. Isn't that interesting? Fascinating. I remember recently hearing an investigation. It wasn't an investigation, it was an interview with a clairvoyant person. And she was asked, what is it going to look like after the end of the Mayan calendar? And she said, I can see nothing. I see nothing after that time. Now, some people would say, oh my God, makes this quite fearful. The point is, the future is not the past. I truly believe that the future holds for us something that we've never experienced before with the rise in this particular way. I'd just like to interrupt a moment. I'd like to ask, what does leadership mean to you? Anyone? What is leadership, in fact? We're talking about it. What is leadership? It's a word we use a lot, just like work-life balance. No one has ever defined it to me. Work-life balance. It seems to me we're working and living all the time, or at least living all the time. So what is leadership? Who would like to tell us? Isn't this fascinating? Yes, please.
To me, leadership is getting up and closing the curtain so we can see you, okay? Because the sun is shining so strongly behind you.
Wonderful.
We can't really see you.
So leadership is getting up and closing the curtain.
Here's this problem right now.
How has it been for you, Andre? Could you connect with me? Now notice that her leadership is bold, it's intentioned, it's for the common good, and it's inclusive.
Okay, you're almost like the Messiah. We can't really see you because the sun is shining so boldly behind you.
My God.
Okay, there we go. Talk.
Oh,
Thank you. You wouldn't believe how it's been watching you.
What
You're
is
just
he-
like an apparition, but we can't see you because the sun is so bold.
and I wondered why people weren't. So we saw here clear evidence of leadership. Now notice it served the greater good. It was not self-serving. It was not fueled with any kind of narcissism or megalomania. It was given with generous intention. Thanks very much. Oh yes, this is a very different experience now. How has it been for you, Andre? Andre is putting this on film. So have I just been an apparition the whole time? Oh my God. That's all right. Just a shadow of my former self. My goodness. So coming back, so what is leadership, please?
Leadership is questions from people. So I think leadership is an expression of your own unique talents and to me a sense of being grateful and appreciative of others and yeah, I think all of us will exercise our leadership differently, but some of the things you mentioned, it's about not wanting to fix people, it's about wanting to support and nurture others, and it's about development, and it's about listening, and it's about intuition.
Beautiful. So, unique to each of us, You said fueled with gratitude and service, more catalytic than imposing, absolutely, and building on our own innate gifts. Did I capture that fairly well? Thank you, that was beautiful. Anything else? Rob?
Well, I think a lot of it is just an ability to give the sense to other people that you would, in fact, take them down the right path. And I'm thinking mainly of the people who were at school or at university who were always the captain of any sports team. And I'm talking about the days when it was entirely amateur sport.
Yes.
My great friend Brian Sugden, who was the captain of every single team he ever played on. Not because he was anything very special, but just because he had something about him that he just naturally became the captain.
So it was in his character. Yes. So leadership, the character of the person. Interesting, Lao Tzu, Chinese philosopher, said to be is to do. To be is to do. How oftentimes we are defined by our activity, by our station, and not by who we are. To be is to do. Beautiful. Anyone else like to add to this? Please.
I feel leadership is a privilege to be involved with those who trust you.
She says leadership is a privilege to be involved with those who trust you. What a wonderful statement. Absolutely. It's a privilege. Rockefeller said, as responsibility increases, rights decrease. It's powerful. It's a wonderful statement. And so true leaders would always hold themselves accountable. And I think about also Tao Te Ching. The trees with the heaviest fruit hang closest to the ground. So the true leaders are those who are most modest. In other words, those of greatest substance are most humble. I'm thinking about leadership as behavior. Behavior. So it's not hierarchical, it's not positional, it's behavior. And what is that behavior? The ability, the practiced ability to excite and inspire human potential. So that we call forth the best of people around us. And it makes me think then about language. And how, again, language invites and sets a tone for human engagement. You know, for example, in the Tibetan language, if we greet someone, the only way to greet someone in Tibetan language is tashi dele. What does it mean? I see the greatness which is in you. Going back to Dr. David Bohm, what we seek is evidence of what we find. If I see the greatness in her, I invite the greatness in her. Also, I will then mirror the greatness in her. Isn't that beautiful? In the Smiley sect of the Muslim faith, the only greeting is Ya Ali Madat. Ya Ali Madat. Ali, Eloh, Allah. Hello, it's a cognate, God. Rob, I see the God in you that shines to me. Ya Ali Madat. That's leadership. That is leadership. Not holding someone small and in fear, but inviting them to show up in the fullness of their being. In South Africa, Sawubona, Sawubona, I see you, I see you. Not the appearance of you, not the achievement of you, not the exterior of you, but the heart and soul of you. Even in the Hawaiian language, we say aloha. No. Aloha. What does it mean? God's breath. The native Hawaiians touch foreheads. Their breath intermingles, confirming the oneness they share. So leadership, I believe, is so much fulfilled in that intention. It is spiritual. To which extent, then, everyone is of one. Everyone is part of the whole. A lot of things I'm saying today I had not planned, but you inspire me. And I thank you for listening with such warmth and care. In the Hebrew language, the word for God is Eloh, or Elohim. We might translate that, as Aristotle would say, to pure activity. Or as Thomas Aquinas said, God was the only self-sufficient existence. But then there's another word in Hebrew which is rarely uttered. Yahweh, it means I am. Each of us is a manifestation of creation. And when we see the other in true leadership, we are actually calling forth the divine in them. Please.
I think it also
Yes.
And you do that through serving and through mentorship and support.
She says that leadership is all about empowerment. So it is not conspicuous or self-serving, it shows up in evidence. Which leads us to this place, and that is, what are the new models of leadership and how do they contrast to what we've seen in the past? Now remember Jack Welch. Maybe you don't. Maybe you shouldn't. Jack Welch was the CEO of General Electric, a very successful businessman and leader of a huge corporation. And one of his contemporaries at that time was a man named Larry Bossidy, who wrote a book called Execution, the Discipline of Getting Things Done. That was his leadership book. Now let's look at the model of Larry Bossidy, which would be of the generation of Jack Welch. And let's then look at the contrast. So here is Jack Welch's and Larry Bossidy's model of leadership. 1, know your business, know your people. 2, insist on realism. 3, set clear goals and priorities. 4, follow through. 5, reward doers. 6, expand people's capabilities. We're getting low on the list here. And 7, know yourself. So let's just flip that upside down. What do the new models of leadership look like? Just within the past 10 years. Let's look to John Maxwell. These are going to be all men, with one exception. But notice how they combine neatly both masculine and feminine traditional values and attributes. This is John Maxwell. To be a leader, this is what he says. Listen well enough to lead through their eyes. Relate well enough to communicate with their hearts. Work well enough to put tools in their hands. And think well enough so as to challenge and expand their minds. So the leadership is not self-serving. It shows up in evidence. There was a baseball player named Reggie Jackson. And he said, the best coaches I ever played for convinced everyone on the team that they were far better than they actually were. And they were. What we see is what we're going to find. But let's take another example. Let's see now. Stephen Farber wrote a great book called Radical Leap, Extreme Leadership. And this is what he says about leadership. He says, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. When we do what we love, we pour our hearts into our activity with unbridled passion, commitment, enthusiasm, tenacity, boldness, courage. It's in the service of people. It serves something greater beyond ourselves. It's morally defined. It's ethically bound. And people love what we do because our values consistently show up in all of our chosen behaviors and actions. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. Tim Sanders, he was senior in the Yahoo Corporation. And he wrote an article that's been printed and reprinted many, many times. He says this, love is the killer app. In a business magazine? You must be kidding. Love is the killer application. And what does he say? It's not a high-handed business practice and holding your people in fear that's going to make you successful. It's love. Really. This is what he wrote. And people are listening. All people seem to be listening. And what does he say? What is his definition of love? It's taken from a man named Milton Meyerhoff, who wrote a book called On Caring. He says, love is the selfless promotion of the growth of another. So it's behavior, it's intention, it's discipline. Let's take it further. Joseph Jaworski. Now, Joseph Jaworski Sr. was the leading attorney in the Nixon-Watergate affair. And his son, Joseph Jaworski, also an attorney, wrote a book on leadership. Now think of the title. The title is Synchronicity. In other words, unity and diversity. The inner path of leadership. So we don't have a situation where the leader's up here and cascading down among the people. No, intricate, implicit. And this is what he says. Traditional leadership was all about conspicuous accomplishment and imperious power. But true leadership is about creating an environment in which you and all your people continually learn in your unfolding future. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that beautiful? Now, another book that's been read all across North America, certainly in the corporate world, is by Jim Collins. And the book is called Good to Great. Has anyone read this book? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about it. And here's a statement that really epitomizes his intention. He would say, your leadership is about vision, but it's also about creating an environment in which the truth is heard and the brutal facts are confronted. We could send a message to Enron and to WorldCom on that score, maybe even Wall Street. Don't mean to be flippant, respectful, but nevertheless. So this is what he said. Therefore, lead with questions, not answers. Engage in dialogue, not coercion. And conduct autopsies without blame. Someone said just earlier that leadership was a privilege. What a wonderful thing to say. A privilege to serve. And I'm thinking of a story that comes to mind. The man was Jim Kelleher. Jim Kelleher was the CEO of Southwest Airlines. Are you familiar with his story? Southwest Airlines, which is a model of WestJet today. And here's the story, which has been printed and told many, many times. But I think it tells volumes about leadership, true leadership. So one of his vice presidents came to him one time at a social gathering and said, Jim, I and my team, we have a fantastic idea. We've done a lot of investigation. We would like to have the opportunity to present to you, and with your blessing, we'll move forward. We think it could really do a lot for our company. You know what Jim Kelleher said? Go ahead. You don't have to tell me about it at all. Really? Okay. So that same person went away, and they worked on this project for a number of months. About 6 months later, he made an appointment to come to the CEO. 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, whatever. And he walked into the room like this, kind of slouched. And Jim Kelleher said, how are things going? Notice he asked a question. He didn't say, oh, you look depressed. How can he know how he's feeling? He said, oh, how are things going? He said, well, Jim, I'm here either to resign or to be fired. Oh, really? Why? Well, that project that we took on, we gave it our all, every passion. We looked at every possible opportunity. But we missed one particular detail. And the result of which was that we've just lost this company $500,000 in 6 months. And this is what Jim Kelleher said, oh, okay. How long have you been with us now? He said, 9 years. Oh, really? And in that time, how's your career gone? He said, well, I've ascended actually over time. Really? So we obviously have a lot of belief in you. We've made quite an investment in you, in fact. Isn't that right? And by the way, our investment has just increased by $500,000. Oh, really? Oh, how interesting. Yes, I guess that's true. What did you learn from that experience? Oh, he said, hindsight is 20/20. We learned so many things. It was just astounding. What do you feel you will bring forth from that learning? I think amazing, amazing skills and practices. So Jim Kelleher said, thanks very much for coming by. It's always good to see you. I'm always here for you anytime you like. So just drop by anytime you need any good counsel or just want to have a conversation. How did that person feel leaving the room? What would you say? He was walking taller. That's leadership. What would you say? Yes, absolutely. What would you say? How did he feel leaving the room? Yes, please. Okay. What would you say? Empowered. Isn't that phenomenal? Phenomenal. Anyone like to add any more? Do you have any other thoughts to that? What do you think was his level of trust and loyalty as he left the room of the CEO? A lot higher. Absolutely. And we can think about so many organizations that have held people captive in fear. How can we possibly be creative in that environment? Einstein said that creativity can only exist within a playful environment, full stop. Let's look at that biochemically. If we're fearful, we've got adrenaline and cortisol flying through our veins, fright and flight. Whereas if we're in a playful environment, we have serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins, And my word, what kind, oh, we're getting a bit biochemical here. But nevertheless, it all makes sense. It's all the same. It's just so fabulous. It's so wonderful. And that's the environment we are intentioned to create. It's so, so beautiful. So, as we look further, we're saying, well, what can we do? What can we do, actually, to participate in this new time in history? How can we participate in that? I think there's an invitation to one and all of us really to nurture, let's say, our feminine side, man and woman. If you agree that we have, so to say, both, let's nurture that, and quite mindfully. And so how could we go about that? The softer side. How can we become heart-centered? Heart-centered in our practice, in our behavior. Who would like to comment to that? Anyone? Please. Compassion. Absolutely. What a wonderful word, compassion. To suffer with. Compassion. Suffer with. What else? Please. Be mindful. So really pay attention to our behaviors and to perhaps their anticipated consequences. Mindful. Beautiful. Rob.
Well, if you had the old attitudes of male dominance, and we are of an age that maybe we still have vestiges within us, that we should actually forget about those and nurture those values that will in fact allow women to come and to get ahead. Because as far as I can see, it's only when the whole of society accepts a certain thing often that women are on an equal basis, like in law, completely on an equal basis here, but not in business in Toronto.
Yes. Now that fortunately is changing. Thank you, Rob, for pointing that out. Now Sheryl Sandberg would say this, that women are typically not at the top of their organizations. These are her words, because she would say men look for the top position, therefore they get it. That's a goal, they set it, they go for it. She would say, in her own words, that women do not aspire to that because they're looking for, in her words, deeper and more meaningful goals. In other words, relationship, family, inclusivity, community. She would also go on to say that women don't aspire to those higher positions because women are seen as being nurturing. And one would assume then that nurturing behavior is not leadership behavior. In other words, great for team, but not to stand on the top of the mountain. She also would add that if a man, for example, in her opinion, succeeds, that he would say, he would draw attention to his own accomplishment. Yes, I did this because I practiced this and I learned this and so forth. Whereas a woman would say, oh, and I had a great team. And so her advice would be for a woman to say, and as I'm coaching many clients, I would say to my women clients, first of all say, I'm so proud for what I've been able to achieve. And I'm so deeply honored for the support that I gathered from all of my team. But to take at least that. Because as Sheryl Sandberg might point out, if we don't celebrate our own accomplishments, maybe we have none to celebrate. That's just an expectation. But how profound that is. I think, too, that it's so important that we actually take a position. So in other words, again, words, nothing, meaning everything. Take a position. Stand in. Sponsor, not just mentor or teach. I have several women clients now in government, and some are phenomenal, outstanding. And so what would I do? I would phone to a deputy minister, and I'd say, I'd like you to spend time, a woman, and I'd like you to spend time with this person, and really stand in for her. Take a position. We see now other organizations rising in the world. We have Catalyst. How many people are familiar with Catalyst? Thank you. So Catalyst started in the US, now to Canada, now worldwide. It's a not-for-profit supporting women in positions of leadership. Not militantly, no, in a spirited dialogue. And by the way, we're not looking for something where we're suddenly going to diminish men and elevate women and give some kind of unfair treatment. No, the best person for the best job. We have it in sports, why not have it in every aspect of life? Let's bring it forward in that way, with intention. I wonder, too, if there's an opportunity for us also in our individual practice to really come to that heart-centered place. Heart-centered. How many people here meditate? Beautiful. To make that part of our daily practice. To go back to Aristotle, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. So let's create habits that really bring us to that heart-centered place. I'm thinking, too, how many people here have a vision for their life? See how few. Of the 400 people to whom I've had the privilege of giving my leadership course, I think fewer than 1% actually have a vision for their life. They're senior in their organizations, they're earning all kinds of money, and yet that which is nearest and dearest to them, somehow they've neglected. So how are we going to come to a vision? This is what I might suggest to you respectfully. Say, how would I like to be remembered? Ask yourself that question. How would I like to be remembered? That will bring forth your core values. I'd like to be remembered as a person who was loving, who was faithful, who was loyal. Core values. Core as in heart. The second would be, what are my 4 priorities in life? Takes time. This doesn't come easily. My 4 priorities in single words. If you asked me that question, I would say, number 1 priority is health. In all aspects, spiritual, emotional, physical, mental. The second would be intimacy. I'm not talking about sexuality here. Spiritual intimacy. Taking an unconditional interest in another person's well-being. Intimacy. The third would be influence, as in teaching, as in mentoring, as in conducting symphony orchestras. Influence. And the last would be freedom. So when we take our core values and put that together with our priorities, we can create a vision for our life. How does that sound to you? Could that be of value? And how important, above all things, to thine own self be true. He was a man, Shakespeare, but he had a good thing to say. True. How powerful that is. Then we can have a vision which might show up in this fashion. I will live to fulfill my priorities of health, intimacy, influence, and freedom, consistently aligned to my values of, in my case, integrity, enthusiasm, encouragement. How powerful that would be. It seems to me that we are so pressured in our lives, day by day, moment by moment. And how do we keep that center? O Sensei, the founder of Aikido, was commented by one of his students. He said, "Master, you are always in balance." He said, "No, typically I'm out of balance, but I know how to get back into balance." And what would be a good metaphor for that? How about this? Balance, imbalance, balance, imbalance, balance. It's part of life. So, if we have a vision and we have our values, there's a taut line between those two. And at any given moment, we can say, what is my behavioral choice? What is my action? Is it grounded in my values? Does it take me to my vision? We can come back to center, back to center, back to center, back to center. I'm thinking, too, wouldn't it be valuable to set an intention for every day? How busy we are. What might an intention be? Tell me, what would be one intention or direction that you would like to give yourself every day? Anything? An intention. Smile more. How beautiful. Thank you. What might be your intention, please? Love more. By behavior love. Beautiful. And notice how her whole body language changed. It was beautiful, radiant, shining. What might another one be?
Laugh more.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, laughter balances head and heart in wondrous ways. What else? Please.
Simple.
Simple. Keep it simple. Very much. That's so beautiful within the Chinese philosophy, like Tao Te Ching. We can think of those wonderful quintessential statements. If you want to have something, you've got to be prepared to let go of it. Just as air passes through a reed, the wise person does not resist change. What we resist persists, so simple, so profound. Xie xie. What else might there be in terms of a daily intention? Please.
Ask more
Ask more questions. Discover. Isn't it amazing when we ask questions, we suspend assumptions and really get to know someone? Do you remember in Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? How many people have read that? And remember the opening of that book? I'll just paint a very quick picture. And that is this. Rush hour, Chicago, hot, smelly, dirty, humid, a bus packed with people. Stephen Covey happens to be one of the people on that bus. And he sees 2 young children running around and disturbing the passengers whose patience is tested to the nth degree. Stephen Covey is not the type of person who generally intrudes, but in this case he decides to speak up. And he looks across and he sees the man who probably is the father of these children. And he goes over to him and he says, "Excuse me, sir, are you the father of these 2 children?" He said, "Oh, yes, I am, actually." Stephen Covey, really holding himself in, he said, "Sir, how can you, as a parent, as a responsible parent, allow your children to behave in this way? Irritating all these passengers with this behavior. And this is what the man says. "We have just come from the hospital where their mother is dying. They do not know what is going on. They are acting out their feelings, and I'm totally lost as to what to do." When we ask questions, we discover from their point of view and suspend assumptions and judgment, and how important that would be. I have a friend, a deputy minister here in our government, a lovely individual, and every day she sits down and she looks to her choices. And she said, "What went well today? What was tricky or challenging? What could I have done better?" And she comes from that place. I think how wonderful that is, to come from that space. Going back to Lao Tzu, to be is to do. Leadership begins here. It expresses there. It shows up there. How lovely that is. How beautiful that is. When we started off today, I was suggesting that we are entering a new paradigm where we're seeing the rise more and more of women in positions of influence, authority, and leadership throughout the world. I think there's a golden opportunity for all of us to participate in that movement, in that direction, both within ourselves and within our communities, and to do so with a loving intention, mindfully, generously, unconditionally, and wonderfully. I'm deeply honored for the privilege of meeting with you here today, and for those who have joined us online. I thank you for the privilege of your attention, and I hope that there has been a little value in which I have shared with you. I thank you so much. I wonder if anyone would have any comment or anything that they would like to share with the room from their own experience or from their own perception. We welcome you. Anyone, please. Anything?
I'd like to say one thing. You know, in your goals for the day,
Yes.
would it be, I've heard, laugh more, all the spiritual things, but is one of them not to move your life on just 1 inch? In other words, life is a journey, isn't it? And at the end of the day, are you in the same spot or back, or should you be just 1 inch further on?
Lovely. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yes, absolutely. To have a strategy, to see a goal, and if we want different results, we need to choose different behaviors and mindfully embed those behaviors in our daily practice as we move forward, for sure. There was a quotation from Peter O'Toole, a great actor. And of course, he's had a long, wonderful career, more than 50 years. And the question to him was, what was the greatest direction you ever received? Quite a statement. Peter O'Toole said, "Not bigger, deeper." Pretty strong. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. It is my great pleasure to thank Peter for his time and his wisdom and his inspiring talk. I do want to add one small thing on leadership. I remember it was a Chinese proverb which went like this: "The man who led the singing fell off the bridge, but even under the bridge, he led the singing."
Good.
Well, I just remember it, and I give it to you, not as anything profound, but just as a way to finish off a wonderful, wonderful hour. And thank you very much indeed. And Peter, I have a small gift for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. By kind favor of our wonderful team who put it all together.
Thank you, Rob.
Yes, thank
That's
you very
great.
much.
Thank you.
And a card.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you all. Thanks so much for that. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming today.